All right, so it looks like we are good to go. So we are live now. So I guess the first question for our discussion is, it says, so far we have learned to evaluate business models of startups. Today we will examine the business model decisions of a startup in a mature industry. As a group, begin by discussing the following questions. So the first question is, was the venture capital industry attractive for Andreessen Horowitz to enter in 2009? What does everybody think?
I think yes. They proved with how much that they raised and everything. Like they proved that they were successful in the beginning. So I think that shows that it was good for it.
I also think yes, because I thought they brought a new feel to venture capitalist industry. And what I mean by that is it was more modern, and it was a lot of I don't know if you understand when I say young. It was like a younger feel to it, and with new industries and people who wanted to put their stuff out there. That's what I felt, and the competition I felt was it was very strong because they were competing with really big firms who had been in the industry for a very long time. So
yeah, one of their competitors, they talked about the new Enterprise Associates was 5 times their size and had $13 billion in capital.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it was definitely a good move for them. And I think that they did see opportunity there. So I think it was appealing because they saw that they could do it differently. And it said in the case study that they had decided to take more of an approach of like a talent agency rather than a venture capitalist firm. And so they did a little bit of a different twist there, which is kind of what Paulette was talking about, is they took a totally different approach to the venture capitalist market. And then another thing that stood out to me was they said that the venture capitalist market had declined, so there weren't as many competitors in the market, even though there were still huge companies. There weren't as many as there had been just a few years previously.
Right.
All right, so the next question is, we've already talked about what the competition was like. What was the typical fate of new entrants in the industry? Why was this so, and what were the trends in venture capitalist fund performances at this time? So one of the things that stood out to me is they said that only the top 5%, the majority of the money in the industry came from like the top 5 companies or something like that. It was like the top 5% actually made decent money. The rest were all just kind of somewhat mid performers, if even at all. And a lot of them lost money at the time. And so it definitely was a riskier market to get into. And I think at the time it was, the economy was kind of different at that time too, because 2009 was right after the economy kind of busted, and so it was kind of a more challenging time to get into an investing market as well, because at that time investors were kind of holding on to their money a little bit more and not as investing as much, and so I think that was kind of an interesting thing about that time too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It was they came up with the idea, I mean, that of opening a venture capitalist firm at a very tough time when things weren't going so well. And they were also competing against really big firms who, like you said, like like huge firms that were the main ones who were running the venture capitalist industry. So, yeah, I stand with you. So.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking that the startups for this industry is really hard because of the big established companies already, like the new enterprise one that we mentioned before. And I saw in the case study that it said 3% of the venture capitalist firms generate 95% of the industry returns.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that supports your point that if you're one of that 3%, then you're doing really well, but the rest of the firms are struggling to get there.
yeah, that was the number I couldn't remember it off the top of my head, but that was the number I was thinking of from the case study as well. So it says, with all the entrenched incumbents and catch-22s, what silver lining did Andreessen Horowitz see, and how did they plan to succeed in this difficult environment? So I'll go ahead and I guess kind of say what I saw. But so from what I saw, they saw that they could do things differently. One of the things that stood out to me was that one of the requirements to be a general partner in their company was that you had to have been a CEO of a tech company. You had to have tech experience, and you had to have, like, what was it, long-term vision or whatever, to be able to. Those were their requirements. And so they took a totally different approach to it. Most companies wanted their entrepreneurs to get the business started and then turn it over to a more promising CEO, where they found that a lot of tech companies that had the CEO that had long-term vision was actually the best were actually the entrepreneur themselves. Instead of turning it over, they were focusing on keeping that entrepreneur in the CEO position. And so I think that was something that they saw that they could do differently. And they also, like I said, they saw it differently. They saw it as more of a talent management approach, and they created a full network to help their entrepreneurs be successful. Where a lot of other firms, it was, you'll work with this person, we'll help you with this, and everybody just kind of knew everything. Where in Andreessen Horowitz, they created like specialties. So they brought on specialists in marketing and specialists in all the different arenas, and made that available to all their entrepreneurs. So I think that really was something that they saw that they could do, that would allow for greater success.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked how they said that the firm on page, I don't know, you guys could go on page 12. So it says the co-founders had conceived that Andreessen and Horowitz would be a professional service firm that would be run more like a corporation rather than a service.
Yep.
And that I thought that was cool because they treated all their operation groups as if they had goals, and so I thought that was really nice.
I thought they succeeded too because of their experience and the amount of research and stuff that they put into it.
Yeah.
Because they did that really well, I thought. And then, like Daniel was saying, in this case study, it said like they found success is 10% in picking who you're going to go with, but then 90% sourcing the right deals. And so once they picked who they were going to go with, they tried to accelerate those startups as much as they could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. To go off of what Paulette was saying, they ran it like a company because all of their general partners were CEOs of companies, and so that's what was natural to them, was to run it as if they were CEOs of a company. And so I think that's what made the whole culture of the business different than other venture capitalist firms.
Right. And they also, instead of having, you know, just two partners to have good returns, they decided to have junior partners that would allow them to really just help them grow. Anyway.
All right. So the next question is, why did Andreessen Horowitz specifically target first-time technical co-founders? How has the cost of tech startups impacted the venture capitalist industry? How has it impacted the need for technical co-founders to raise capital? And do these trends apply to other sectors such as life sciences or clean tech?
I think they're targeting first-time technical co-founders because that's like, I feel like that's the new thing going on. Like, everybody wants to be involved in developing new technology. And so it was smart of them to focus more on technical co-founders rather than on something else, because I mean, right now everything is focused around technology, and so that's what I think.
And wasn't there both of their backgrounds in technology? Like, I know that
Yeah.
the Anderson guy, or Andreessen, helped find like Netscape and stuff like that. So what, hasn't he always been involved in the technical?
Right.
They both have.
Yeah, so that's kind of their expertise. So that's why I figured that, you know, they would target what they're.
Yeah, because they're experienced.
Well, and I think that's also like really where the opportunities are too, because if you look at all of the research that they did, they looked at the co-founders or founders that ran the tech companies that were successful, and they were all first-time tech co-founders. So Bill Gates and like all of the different people that they had listed out there, they really were first-time technical co-founders, and that's where they saw a trend of success. And so I think that's kind of why they went after that. And then another thing in the case was it talked about how the cost of internet and everything going down, and with cloud storage and just the increase in technology, it made the cost of starting a company way less expensive. And so there wasn't as big of a need for venture capitalists. And so that's kind of why there was that decline from 2000 to 2009, is because the cost of starting a business had gone down. And so it wasn't as needed for these entrepreneurs to get round one funding or whatever it was right away. They could wait until they grew a little bit more and had more money coming in. And sometimes they didn't need venture capital at all. They could fund it themselves because the cost had gone down. And when you look at other industries like biotech and things like that, they are getting cheaper, but there still is way more of a need for venture capital in those industries because they are way more expensive.
Yeah, you're right.
And it does. The trends don't really apply to the life sciences or clean tech, I thought, because in there it said that clean tech has been out of favor in recent years. It could change. So.
Yeah.
I also saw that I figured that they saw a big opportunity when they saw the big success Facebook had, and other it was Facebook, and I can't remember another.
Skype was their big one, so they bought into Skype.
Skype and Twitter.
Yeah, and then Skype was the one that they sold off, and it sold for, I think they said 4 times what they paid for it. So they ended up getting a return of 4 times their investment. And so that's kind of what started really propelling them into the growth phase.
Yeah, so I think that they saw that opportunity, and it was a huge success. And then I think that's what more than anything, that's what really encouraged them to focus on technical stuff. Are we on the second question, or?
So we are now on to, because we already answered what choices do technical founders have for financing today. So because we already talked about that it's cheaper, so they can self-finance or angel investors instead. And so we're on question 4. So it says venture capital firms compete on their ability to source, pick, win. How does Andreessen Horowitz business model influence these abilities compared to other venture capitalist firms?
Well, don't they put more effort into helping their pick succeed?
Yeah, the thing that really stood out to me was that whole network idea. And they did say that there were several, and they did advertising as well and marketing, which other venture capitalist firms looked down on. But because they did those things, they created that network and really made it successful, and really changed the way venture capitalists or the venture capitalist industry looked. They got more referrals. So those that were successful referred their friends. And one of their philosophies was that great knows great. And so they figured that if those that they already had that were great would refer their friends, then they would find more great opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that it said in there that 70% of their contacts or whatever came from referral from existing contacts. So that shows their satisfaction with it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Even those that didn't get funding still highly recommended them because of the way they were treated.
Yeah.
So the next question, it says, think of sources as the ability to get founders to come to the door seeking money. How does Andreessen Horowitz treat its founders? How does the way they treat their founders differ from the way a traditional venture capitalist treats them? Will this increase, decrease, or have no effect on the number of potential deals compared to the competition? So I think that's kind of what we were talking about. The way they treated people brought more people to the door, and because of that, they were able to see the opportunities where other firms may not have had the opportunity to even see those ideas because they didn't go to them.
Yeah, I thought they treated people with no one was higher than the other and no one was lower than the other. It was all kind of equal. And so I thought that really brought a balance to the firm, because people worked the same, they worked as hard as everybody else, and they really kind of understood each other and the way they worked, and they worked together as a group. And so I thought that really brought a nice feel and success to the company.
Yeah, and the other part is they really had respect for people. So it talked about how other firms, when they were going to listen to pitches, they would show up late, they would be on their phones or their computers the whole time. And then instead of letting them know what they thought, they're like, we'll get back to you, and then just went dark. No responses, no anything to let them know what they thought. Where with Andreessen Horowitz, they showed up on time, they were there, they were present, they listened. And at the end of the presentation, they told them, either we'll fund you or we won't, but this is why we won't. And gave them direct feedback that they could use. And I think that was a huge part of what they did differently that made them successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was impressed with that too, that it said that they always gave feedback. And so that's just going to help the, company grow and succeed anyways.
Yeah, and when they needed to change something, they were very willing to work together and change that specific something together. Not like, oh, well, you do this and I'll do this. It was all always together. And so I think when you work together as a company, you really bring success into it. So. Okay.
All right.
So the next question.
So it says,
Are we on?
Okay, so it says,
change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How will this change if Andreessen Horowitz begins to fire CEOs because they are not performing well? Will this increase, decrease, or have no effect on the number of potential deals to Andreessen Horowitz sees compared to the competition?
So I think that partially goes back to the way they treat them. So if you remember from the beginning, it talked about how a lot of the other venture capitalists came in and said, oh, we just have this laid back attitude. So it's just be laid back, informal. It doesn't have to be anything formal. And then when it came down to time to perform, really they wanted the formal. And people didn't know how to act. And so because of that, they would let go of CEOs because they said that they weren't doing their job. And so I think it all comes from setting expectations at the beginning, which is what they did really well. Is they said, okay, this is how it's going to be. These are the resources we have available to you. We're not going to do the work for you, but we will set you up for success. And so I think it was a whole change in the way they came at it in the first place. And so I think because of that, they don't have to fire as many CEOs. But I think if it did come down to it, it would be for good reason. They wouldn't just fire CEOs for no reason.
Yeah.
And they can't just never fire anyone, like if somebody's really not doing well, they can't. They have to for them as well.
Right. I think when they would hire CEOs, they really knew what they were looking for in that specific person. And so, I mean, to how they would treat people, going back to how they treat people, it's a very respectful way. And instead of firing them very harshly or telling them, oh, well, you're really bad at this, but instead give them feedback and allow them to, practice or become better in that specific something. But yeah. So will this increase? We answered that already. Yeah.
So it's now, how does the operating team help Andreessen Horowitz source, pick, win? Does it increase the odds of getting more high quality deal flows? If so, why? Does it affect Andreessen Horowitz's ability to pick winners? Does it actually have an impact on the odds of success? So I think that we've talked about that. So as far as the source, pick, win goes, the way they created the operating team, the one thing that really stood out to me was the PR person, the public relations person that went out and actually, and the marketing people, and they went out and worked with people in the industry, even if it wasn't tied to the portfolio, so that they could build this network that allowed them to get referrals. So they were using that as a way to source and get people to present ideas to the company. And even though they only picked, I think it said 10%, 90% of them they turned down, it still gave them the opportunity to see all of the deals or all of the ideas and pick what they really felt would be successful. And then they had that team available to really, really help the these entrepreneurs be successful, and that's where the win piece comes into it.
Yeah. I liked how I wrote it down, but I didn't write in what page. But it said they said that success in the firm is probably 10% about picking and 90% about sourcing the right deals and having entrepreneurs choose the firm as a partner. And so that, I mean, I would have thought that their success came from picking someone instead of sourcing it. And so what I understand by the 90% of about sourcing means that they work around the deals and they find a way to make it successful. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and I think part of the whole sourcing thing too is the amount of people that come through your door. Because if you're not seeing these ideas, if they're not coming to you, then you're not able to. If they're not coming to you, then you're not able to make a deal with them. So it really is all about getting those people into your business or into your company so that you can hear their pitches and you can have the opportunity to make a deal with them. So if they're not coming in, you're not able to even make a deal with them.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, they structured it in a way that they had a lot of people come in, and so they were able to be picky and sift through them to find the best one, so that that helped their statistics and ratio of success as well. And then the operating team was good for them too, because it said in the case study too, we are not training wheels for startups. So they, like we mentioned, they offered all their resources there, but they didn't run their company for them and be too involved in it. They made them do it themselves. But they were there to help and coach.
Yeah, and I did make a comment too that by doing it that way, it did give them it did set them up for scalability, because if they were trying to help each individual company really being involved, then they just wouldn't have the staff to be able to help all of the companies as they grow. And so by doing it and setting it up with the way they have it structured, they are set up to scale and to become bigger as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Put yourself in the shoes of Andreessen and Horowitz. You must decide whether or not to seek to double your assets under management. Vote as a group. The decision must be unanimous. Consider the following as you decide. How many portfolio companies can one general partner reasonably support? Are there any economies of scale in this business? Will you have to hire more operating team people? If so, will the partners actually make more money for doubling their assets, or will all of the additional profits go to hire more people?
So I'm probably going to be different than everybody else, but after looking at everything, I know they're doing really great and they're doing really well, but I don't know that right now, because the other part of it is they haven't proven their concept, because they haven't gone through the whole business cycle. So I don't know that they're set up to really double at this point. They would have to more than likely double their general partners, which in the case study it did say was going to be difficult because it's hard to find those that meet their qualifications. And if they dumb down those qualifications to get more partners in, then it dilutes what the company is. Also, they were saying that the market, the way they have it set up with the actual business culture and doing it more as a talent agency, you have to it makes it harder as you get bigger. So the smaller a company is, the more communication and the easier it is to maintain that. And if they double too quickly, I think they're going to possibly lose all of that. And so that's kind of where I was thinking about it with in terms of that. And at this point, it depends on how many more companies they add. They may have to expand and hire more operating team. And if so, then it will cut into those profits.
Yeah, I actually thought the same thing. I thought that because I read in the case study that the company is only 4 years old right now, and they don't really have enough investment history to calculate their fund returns, and they don't have enough performance data to prove that, to prove the payoff. And so I just thought because of with lack of like investment history and everything, I don't think that they should double right now. I think they should wait and continue to gradually grow their business and get that investment history and everything under their belt so that they can prove that their business is growing and that it should be worth it and that they can handle the growth before they do it.
Yeah, and I was in the same spot, so.
Especially with the new enterprise associates, like having that as one of their biggest competitors, they have grown and into the different stages, sectors, and geography, but they're also 5 times their size with the $13 billion in capital. And I bet they've been around a lot longer too. And so I just think this company should get more established before they double their assets and grow that much.
Yeah, and I think.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Paulette.
Okay. I would say the same thing. They have the potential to double their assets, but I think it's best because I think Andreessen and Horowitz it's a small but powerful firm, and they have the potential to grow. But yeah, like both of you said, that right now they should take the time to grow their numbers and to have more growth in what they're doing. But as whether in the future to double their assets under management, I definitely think they can do it. And yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
And the other part of the case study that I found interesting is those bigger firms, they are diversified. So they are in other markets as well. And because of that, they are able to even out the dips and the spikes in their revenue levels. And so because of that, they're more set up for that. And I think to diversify at this point, before they really have a true understanding of where their market is and whether their strategy is really working, which they won't know until some of these companies get sold off. Until they know that, I don't know that they're really in a place to diversify yet and go head to head with some of these bigger competitors.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
I think that was a lot.
So I guess it's time for a summary. So does somebody want to summarize what we've talked about and what our decision was?
Sure. In summary, you guys can add on what I laid out too. In summary, we've talked about Andreessen and Horowitz and how they are both from tech backgrounds, and so they have specialized in this area. And they've grown their company enough to be very selective in their process of choosing who they decide to work with, and they're different from the others because of their operating team and how they really sift through the people that they work with, and then so they can choose companies that are better, that are more likely to succeed. And their operating team gives them all the resources that these people need to succeed, and they coach them, but without being too overbearing and running the companies for them. They were wondering if they should double their assets and grow to expand in different sectors and geography right now. And we've all decided that they should wait and become more established because they've only been around a short amount of time, and they don't have the investment history and everything else right now to compete with the competition, and that it could break them. So right now they should aim to become a more established business and give their company a little bit more time before growing to that level. you guys can add whatever.
Yeah, I think that pretty much summed it up. I also I think that as we talked, like I got the impression that all of us were also pretty impressed with the way they did things and the way they looked for an opportunity that allowed them to differentiate themselves from other venture capitalist companies. And because they were able to do that, they were able to find that success that allowed them to be more picky on who they chose, because they did have that sourcing. They had all of those people coming to their door because of the network that they built. And so I think that was a huge part of what made this company successful. And while they're not, we don't all of us agree that they're not ready to double their assets right now. We do think that they are set up for success in the future.
Yeah, and to add something else that made them successful is that they maintained close relationships with not only with the firm's portfolio companies, but as we mentioned before, with public relation, with PR agencies and journalists, and that allowed them to build a network.
Yeah. All right, so I'll go ahead